we were the first club in the country in the Premier League to field a team full of academy graduates. My head of emerging talent, I remember him bringing his laptop in to show me. I saw 2 clips and I said, right, he needs to go straight into Vince and show Vince his player, because I think there's a lot of potential with him. It may be that a certain player is come into your own building. He's not maximising his potential, and he's probably at his ceiling value-wise, so you may need to do something there. Unless your processes are right, you're not going to get the outcomes. So it's ensuring that the processes internally, player development is at the forefront of it, and staff development is at the forefront of it. You're not faced with a low block in the Premier League because you're dealing with animals, complete robots who are just physically dominant and will get after you from day one. Anytime you walk in his office, there's a game on, he's completely obsessed with watching us and watching the opposition. A job title can be, like you say, it could be a sporting director, it could be a technical director, it could be director of football. But essentially, it's that agreed job description which is the most important thing.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast, and today's guest is Paul Jenkins. So Paul is currently the Director of Football Development at Burnley Football Club, and before that particular role he was also the Academy Director for an interim period at Burnley too. So moving back a little bit more than that, Paul actually spent over 20 years with Middlesbrough Football Club, working with pretty much every age group in the academy as well as a first team. So Paul has a wealth of experience when it comes to working with younger players and developing them into players that can make an impact with the first team. So in this conversation, we learn a little bit more about Paul's background and how he progressed from role to role. We then learn more about what he actually does now, day to day. We speak about scouting, we speak about data, we speak about head coach recruitment. So there's lots to unpack here. Really interesting to hear Paul's perspective on many of these things. So before we get into the conversation, a quick shout out to InPlay Online, who are sponsoring this video. Again, more on those guys later. They are a cloud-based video analysis software. And also just want to quickly ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you do find value from this video, please consider giving it a like. So without further ado, let's bring Paul into the conversation. Paul, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Very good, thanks. Sun is shining, Chris, so what more do we want now?
Yeah, perfect. You were just saying you've been out watching training this morning, so is that something you do regularly, Paul?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's important that I understand what the lads are working on, and just being around the players, because certainly player development is a huge part of my role, and also just supporting the first team staff as well. Being visual is important, but also just making sure that you're not too visual too often as well, and it's just finding that right balance really. But on top of that, I enjoy it. It's a beautiful day outside, so we either stick in the office or we get outside for a couple of hours and watch training, and that's what I did today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got a nice little tan going as well, Paul. You're looking fresh. Yeah,
it's this Middlesbrough tan people call us, smoggies, with the chemical industry. Apparently.
yeah, definitely. I know it well. So for those that don't know who you are too much, Paul, I'll pass it over to you to give yourself an introduction. Obviously, you're at Burnley at the moment. So if you want to kind of describe what you're currently doing at Burnley, and then a little bit around what you did before Burnley, and then we'll get into each of those roles if we can as well.
Yeah, for sure. My job title is Director of Football Development at Burnley Football Club. I joined the club 4.5 years ago now when ALK bought Burnley. And prior to that, I'd spent over 20 years at Middlesbrough as a coach, working every age group from, I think, probably under 12s through to the first team when we were in the Premier League. That was my final position at Middlesbrough. I was assistant manager at Hartlepool for a season. And then, like you say, I ended up taking the opportunity to come and join Alan Pace and ALK here at Burnley.
Yeah, perfect. It's you mentioned that 20 years at Boro. So when obviously in preparation for this, I kind of type your name into YouTube, Paul, and there's videos of you as the Boro 21s coach from 10, 12 years ago. So that's
they have hair?
No, I don't think so. To be fair, you've not changed much. You've aged well, Paul. I'll give you that. So
appreciate that.
So you mentioned you've done 20 plus years at Boro. Then, so just thinking back to that time, Paul, like when you were a coach in the earlier days, what were your aspirations as a coach? Because obviously you mentioned you did a bit like first team, obviously the Hartlepool job. Was your thought process at the time to transition from academy to first team? Obviously you've got a bit of a different path, but I'm just curious to see where the technical director came into it.
I think I started very early as a coach. I was an apprentice at Darlington, got released. I went out to New York for 2 years, and I played and coached out in New York. And when I was 21, I came back and started coaching at the Centre of Excellence, as it was then. So I guess for some of the younger guys on here, they might not even know what the Centre of Excellence was, because it flipped over to the academy system. I worked, when I started at Middlesbrough, there was only 2 or 3 of us coaches, and we literally coached every age group. So I would do the 10s and 12s on a Monday night. I'd do the 11s and 13s on a Tuesday, and we just rotated it around. And then the academy system came in. I ended up working with the under 16s for many years, and then I moved up to the 18s for a year, and then primarily I worked with the under 21s, or the reserves, as it was. I never saw myself thinking, right, in 10 years' time, I want to be a first team coach. In 10 years' time, I want to be a manager. This might sound pretty cliche, but I just wanted to be the best coach that I could be with the age group that I was working with. And that pretty much helped me navigate my next position. So when I was the under 16s coach, I always wanted to be the best person I could be and the best coach I could be, and try and be an expert in that field, really, within that age group. And then when opportunities present themselves, the question is, am I ready for it? I always felt ready for it, and there was 2 or 3 occasions where there was an opportunity, then it never happened. And so I understand as well frustrations from young coaches now who sometimes don't get the opportunity. Sometimes somebody else gets a job ahead of them for various reasons. So I can always relate to that. And then when I moved into the 18s, I did the under 18s for a year, and Mark Tinkler was my assistant at the time at Middlesbrough. And within a year, there was an opportunity to go to the 21. So I didn't actually think that opportunity would come around that quickly. Yeah. But it did, and at the time, Tony Mowbray was the manager at Middlesbrough. Tony was my hero as a kid growing up in Middlesbrough. He was the Middlesbrough captain, and I just loved everything about Tony. And so to be able to work with him, and he was absolutely fantastic as a manager, and for the under 18s coach for me, I used to sit in the same office, and it was brilliant. And then Tony pretty quickly lost his job, and Aitor Karanka came in, and there was changes, and I got the opportunity to be the under 21s coach. And that's where really, I think I cemented myself as a coach, and really I learned about that transition into the first team environment. And then we had a pretty successful time in the under 21s. The club as a whole really went through a nice spell where in the 21s we won the league and the League Cup double for the first time in the club's history. Graham Lee was my assistant, Spike, and we had some really some fantastic players who just within that 40-mile radius. We had one player who was outside of the UK, and that recruitment served us well, really, and we did really well with the 21s. The under 18s won their league as well with the Premier League under 18s. So we had a pretty decent season, and for the first time in the club's history, the club ended up playing in the UEFA Youth League the following year, and the club got promoted into the Premier League. So we'd done well over the years with player development at Middlesbrough. I think there was one point where I think outside of the top clubs in the country, we had more young players representing England than any other club in the country. If you think back from Stuart Downing all the way through, honestly, there's that many players I could name them, reel them off. And during that time, we were the first club in the country in the Premier League to field a team full of academy graduates as well. It was the final game against Fulham before we went to the UEFA Cup final, and we had 11 academy graduates on the pitch against Fulham in the final game of the season. So there was, I learned a lot. I was part of a really successful group of staff and players at the time, and then at that point I took my UEFA Pro license course, and I did that. And that was, pretty much in a nutshell, really, of my time at Middlesbrough as a coach. I'd gone all the way through the age groups, really being part of a group of staff that developed players to play for our first team, which, I think in excess of £95 million worth of players were sold or sold on, which generated some, return of investment for the academy at Middlesbrough. But then when I was the 21s coach, that opportunity came. I left, and the opportunity came to move into the first team. And so to really answer your question, I never ever set out to go when I was 21, 22, 25. I want to be X, Y, or Z. I just wanted to be the best coach I could be, which would probably get me recognised, that people would see my skill set and value to move up to the next level.
No, that's really interesting, and I like how you mentioned Tony Mowbray. I mean, I'm a Sunderland fan, Paul, so I have fond memories of Mowbray as well when he was with us. So that's cool. And you mentioned Stuart Downing there as well as one of the players. Obviously, you mentioned there's lots of players. You can't name them all, but just for those kind of the people listening, Paul, can you give an indication of maybe some of the other players that were in the academy at that time that you kind of were part of the development?
It'd probably take the rest of the podcast interview. James Morrison, Lee Cattermole, David Wheater, Adam Johnson. For what for whatever happened off the field with Adam, Adam was one top young footballer at the time. And Ross Turnbull, the goalkeeper, went to Chelsea. Tony McMahon, Stuart Parnaby. Honestly, the list goes on and on and on. Really, Dale Fry, who's still in Middlesbrough's first team now. Dale Fry was. I used to remember Dale Fry as a 9-year-old boy. Still remember him coming in half an hour earlier than anybody else to the training ground at Middlesbrough. His dad would bring him at 5 o'clock. We weren't training until 5:30, and he'd be there practicing and working. And honestly, I think if any of the former players listen to this, they'll probably say, "Well, you never mentioned me, Jenks," But there's just that many that to remember. Andy Taylor, now Andy's loans manager at Leeds United. Andy came through, and Jordan Jones. The list just goes on, Chris, and I think we were just so fortunate at the time throughout that period of late 90s, 2000s, where we had managers. I think we were fortunate in the Premier League that we had some top international footballers in the Premier League playing for us, and what I think, to aid the young players, that was pretty helpful because they had that real, high level player around them, where Steve McLaren trusted people like Stuart Parnaby and David Wheater or Stuart Downing to go and play in the first team.
Okay, so I hope you're enjoying the video so far, but I have a really quick interruption for anybody with an interest in video analysis. So if that's you, please do click the link down below the video for In Play Online. So just to give a quick overview, because I think it'll be relevant to a lot of people that are watching this particular video. So In Play Online is a cloud-based video analysis software. So it allows you to tag your videos, and when you've done your tagging, that includes adding labels, adding comments, adding notes and voice notes even, and you can even illustrate and draw over your clip. So if you are an aspiring analyst looking for your job and you want to create a portfolio of work, if you're a scout looking to make your kind of reports a little bit better and more animated, if you're a coach looking to get into analysis a little bit more, then this tool will be great for you because it starts at just £15 a month. So once you've done your analysis, you can add all the clips to different playlists, which can be downloaded and exported offline. You can put them into presentations and also share them to different people within your team. So it comes with a whole bunch of other features, but I'll let you click the link down below if you are interested. As I say, packages start at just £15 a month, so it's a very affordable solution if you are looking for something to help with your video analysis. So that's it for the interruption. Let's get back to the video. Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned the kind of players were in that kind of 40-mile radius. I want to kind of ask you a little bit more about that, because both at Boro and at Burnley now, in terms of like the regions that you're in, it's quite like you've got in the northeast, you've got Sunderland, Newcastle up there.
Yeah.
With Burnley, you've got the Manchester and the Lancashire club. So how do you think about that? And is that difficult to track players?
Yeah, look, back at the time, if you think about Middlesbrough, where it is geographically, you've probably you can draw half of that out of the 1 hour radius because you've got the North Sea to the right hand side of you. So, we've got Newcastle, we had Sunderland and Newcastle north of us within half an hour, 45 minutes. Leeds is probably an hour south of us. Who Leeds they weren't really challenging us. I didn't think at that time. But we had a really good recruitment department. Ron Bourne was unbelievable at just identifying talent at the time, and Ron was excellent bringing them young players in. All the lads in the northeast really wanted to play for Middlesbrough, and because we had such a good reputation of developing players, but we never spent any money on buying players. There was clubs around the country that we're aware of that were going out to foreign shores or going to Ireland and spending X, Y, or Z on buying young players. We had the 40-mile, pretty much our 40-mile radius, where I just think the northeast is a hotbed of football, and it still is. It really is, and so. It's a bit different. It's like comparing apples and oranges, really, because over in Burnley, it's pretty much known as the Wild West. It's the amount of volume of clubs over here in the Northwest means it's extremely difficult to challenge your big foes. And I think there's probably 6 or 7 Category 1 academies within the 90-minute radius. So we're all competing. We've just got to, have that USP, I think, for Burnley, and that is that players get opportunities here. They will get opportunities. I've just been out. I watched training this morning, and our under-18s are playing up against the first team, in the phase of play stuff. So players get opportunities at Burnley Football Club, and I think that's, like you say, one of the unique things for us is if they're good enough, they will get an opportunity to train, and they will get that opportunity to be in the first team. But it's a massive, massive challenge for clubs like our size here in the Northwest.
Yeah. You mentioned the word kind of the pathway, but also like reputation. I suppose that kind of comes with over time. And, if you're trying to attract a young player and you're speaking to their parents, if you can demonstrate what that pathway is, and like you said there, you get the opportunities, then you're more likely to then, it probably then just helps the cause moving forward. Like, you're going to get more and more players coming if you've shown that pathway is there. Yeah,
of course. Well, look, I don't think we're any different, Chris. I think if you did this podcast with somebody else from another club similar of our size, they'd all be saying the same thing. We're not doing anything radical, but I think that we can demonstrate to players, to agents, to parents that we have a really healthy environment at our football club, and there's different ways to develop them, whether it is directly with our first team or whether it is with partner clubs as well. So and we've been pretty successful so far with that as well. With a player that we bought in the summer, Adewumi, who wasn't quite ready to go in our first team, but enjoyed and really loved our environment. Was clear. We were clear on what we were going to do with him, and that was to put him into the SPL with Dundee. And he's been really successful over there. So there's different ways of how we navigate our way around player development. Yeah. And I'm sure other clubs are trying to do the same. But comparing that recruitment challenges with in the northeast, there's 3 clubs there, and obviously Newcastle they're on a different stratosphere really at the moment in terms of where that club's going. And so I think probably both Sunderland and Middlesbrough are having their challenges as well to be able to compete.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of your current role then now, Paul, what's your involvement in player recruitment now, that youth and development level now? Like, what's your role in that? And can you... No,
I would say primarily, Chris, that emerging talent aspect is a key focus for us as a football club. We know that we have to do them young. So Luca Colaioccio, as an example, Luca was 18. He was playing for Espanyol's first team, but he was a squad player in the first team. But he was 18. He was getting some game time, and the opportunity to take Luca. One of my head of emerging talent, Harry Barnard, I remember him bringing his laptop in to show me Luca, and I saw 2 clips, and I said, right, he needs to go straight into Vince and show Vince his player, because I think there's a lot of potential with him. And that one has worked out well for us, and like you say, that 18, 19-year-old that we feel can have a pretty quick transition into our first team is crucial. Luca was definitely one of them. So the emerging talent area, is a key area for us, I believe. To maximise players' potential, and as a byproduct of maximising potential, will be a maximising value in a return on investment.
Yeah. We've seen more and more clubs kind of develop some sort of like player trading strategy and things like that, Paul. Are you solely looking for players that will benefit Burnley's first team and like would be a benefit for you, or how do you think about kind of the whole trading strategy in terms of bringing players in that maybe might not be right for you? But you mentioned you've referred to Dundee as well with a kind of MCO partnership there, in terms of developing players that can maybe be sold on for a profit and things like that, and make careers at different clubs other than Burnley.
I think football's a business. First and foremost, Chris, it really is a business now, and so you have to be open-minded about your recruitment strategy and how I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, the whole premise of recruiting a player was specifically to play for your football club, and I think that when football has now moved into a real business element of it in player trading, you have to be open-minded to what them options could be. And if you were in a position where, this is going to sound like a real crude analogy, right? But, when people buy houses to flip and, they see an opportunity where they can buy a house, you might need a few quid spending on it, but that opportunity's presented itself. You buy the house, you put it on the market, you get a return of investment pretty quickly. Yep. Clubs are doing that. And I'm not saying that that is what the sole focus for us, but that's pretty much what can happen. If there's a business opportunity there where there's a development pathway that you as an organisation can actually develop a player, and it may be that a certain player still hasn't maximised his potential, and so putting him into your first team might increase his value another 10 times. Well, that may be part of the strategy. It may be that a certain player is come into your own building. He's not maximising his potential, and he's probably at his ceiling value-wise, so you may need to do something there. Likewise, you buy a player, and if you are part of a multi-club operation, there's an opportunity to put him into a partner club. If he develops really well and there's a significant spike in his valuation, it may be that as an organisation, you don't see a pathway to your first team and say, great, thanks very much. We've done really well. You've done really well, and you increase your investment 10 times. So I think I genuinely believe that there'll be a lot of clubs like ourselves that know that this is a business, and like I said, it might sound a crude way to analyse that, but it pretty much is. Sometimes you do that with players,
Yeah, definitely. So. In terms of, there's a lot of viewers that watch this channel, Paul, that are kind of interested in kind of scouting and things like that. I'm not a scout, definitely not. I've worked as a kind of academy analyst back in the day, but I just wanted to ask you a kind of question around any tips or advice potentially for when looking at younger players in terms of maybe things to look out for, because obviously you're assessing their skill and abilities at that time, but you've also got to have an eye for the future, the potential, what can they grow into, and I suppose that comes with experience. You've worked with thousands of academy players, but is there anything you can say on that point in terms of just things to maybe look out for when you are, or things to consider when you are scouting the younger players?
The one bit of advice I'd give anybody, and whether this is coaches or scouts, is put the time in. So if you're a scout, make sure that you get to games. Make sure you get to a broad spectrum of games, and find your niche really in that scouting market. So if you're really good at the foundation phase, then be the best foundation phase. That's a crucial stage and a crucial phase for clubs to find players. And if you can be the best recruiter of identifying talent at that age group, you're going to be pretty well sought after. But to be that good, you've got to get out to games. You've got to know what the game looks like at that age. You've got to then understand what clubs are looking for, what type of, what qualities does a 16-year-old have at Cat 1 level, what in terms of position specifics. So I think it's not just about going to games, Chris, and watching a lot of volume. You can do a lot of volume and not still understand the game and understand what the requirements are. It's going to these games, and understanding and having clarity. If you are working for a club, what are you going to watch that game for? Like, what player are you looking at? What qualities does that player have? What are the club looking for in terms of a right back or a centre midfielder or a striker type of profile? So I would say just making sure that you're doing your due diligence when you go to games. You're not just turning up to a game. Really know why you're going to the game, and then what is your outcome at the end of that game. That's probably, and likewise with coaches. We currently run a former player to coach program now here at Burnley. We've done that with Jack Cork, and we'll look to do that. Nicky Butt's coming in at the moment, and he's doing some consultancy work for us. And Nicky's a well-experienced operator, but Jack's just starting out. He played a game, retired last year. And so I keep saying to Jack, it's hours on the pitch, Jack, that's going to get you better. It's hours on the pitch working with players. And we'll absolutely do that again with players, legends of our club, like Ashley Barnes and, Jay Rodriguez of this world, Ashley Westwood, who's out in the US. We'll never forget about these players that have been a real prominent part of our football club. And if they really see themselves, staying in the game, then it's about us, how can we facilitate their next stage. So, and if it is the next stage, it's about minutes on the pitch, just like I say with scouts as well.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get to kind of ALK. You mentioned ALK, obviously they acquired Burnley a few years ago, maybe two, 3 years ago. I'm not 100% sure the day, but
4.5 years ago now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just really then, Paul, from your time, you mentioned obviously your boro, your Hartlepool FC. How did you then get involved with ALK? And obviously then that's moved into the role currently at Burnley. So just a little around that if you can, Paul.
Yeah, I think that, I'd spent probably then 21, 23 years, something like that. I'd spent on the grass every day, every week, just working with players, developing players. And I came to a stage where I'd left Middlesbrough, and then I went to Hartlepool as assistant manager, and I'd never ever say that it was a bad experience. It was definitely an experience going from the Premier League and working so many years at Middlesbrough to going across to Hartlepool, and I began to understand about the off-field, more about the off-field stuff than the on-field stuff, and being in business myself for many years. In the hospitality industry alongside football, I had some business acumen and understanding of budgeting and things like that. Always had an interest off the field, and not basically an opportunity came where Alan and ALK were acquiring Burnley, and they wanted somebody with that Premier League experience and development players with the academy system. And they needed a technical advisor. And we had a couple of meetings, a few discussions around what it would look like. And I got introduced to them. We had, like I say, some conversations, and from there, really, we took hands on me joining them as technical advisor, which was pretty much all right across the football operation, really, just to almost be a translator in some respects for them, not verbally, but just helping them understand what the game looked like over here and what decisions we may make that would benefit the football club and help them understand, really. And that was pretty much it. But within a short period of time, there was some changes that happened at the football club, which weren't really part of the plan. And there was a needs must. The technical director had moved on, the academy manager had moved on, and as I'm quite sure all the listeners would be aware of what is actually needed in the academy to meet compliance, and so it was probably a pretty obvious thing that I would have stepped in as interim academy manager for the football club, just to, I would say, steady the ship, really, where they didn't have to make too many changes, which is what I did for I think around about a year or so, something like that. And whilst we looked at what the next part of our strategic plan was going to be for the football club, and that included the academy and the first team and the women's team, and then from there, really, we started to think about what the MCO would look like and how we can expand, and then my role changed to the director of football development, really, which is pretty much across the board with first team support, with academy, and then the partner clubs as well. So yeah, I've had a broad spectrum of it. I did say and did stipulate to Alan that I didn't want to go back on the grass at the time. I wanted to focus on my off-field stuff. And then a phone call came one evening to ask to meet him the next day, and for him to tell me and Mike Jackson that Sean was leaving the football club, and can we take over? And I remember him saying, I know you didn't want to go back on the grass, but we need you. And then Jacko and I ended up doing the final 11 games of the season, where we came pretty close to survival, really, you know. But at that point, I realised, you know, and I knew that I wanted to really focus my career on the strategic side of the football side, you know. And that's where I ended up, you know, I got on the FA's technical director's licence, and, you know, so, you know, holding both the technical director's licence and the UEFA Pro licence is extremely rare and unique in this country, you know. I think there's probably the FA told me, I think there's probably about 5 or 7 of us that have got both qualifications, and I think that, you know, that probably helps me and helps the owners as well.
Okay, so if you've made it this far into the video, you must be enjoying the content. Either that or you have simply fallen asleep. So whichever one of them it is, you probably won't mind me asking you for a quick favour. So as you know, I'm always looking to grow the channel. So the bigger the channel gets, the more people we can reach and impact, but also the bigger and better guests we can invite onto the channel to have these types of chats. So with that in mind, if you haven't already done so, I would very much appreciate it if you did hit the subscribe button down below the video. The stats are showing around 25% of viewers are subscribed. So there's a big chunk of you that are watching the videos, but you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, but I will let you off because you can do it right now. It's free and it literally takes 1 second. So if you go down, click the subscribe button, it would mean a lot to the channel and help the channel to grow. So that's all for now. Let's get back to the video. Yeah, interesting. I didn't know you mentioned the kind of your business experience in hospitality. That obviously, I'm sure, plays a part in that as well in terms of.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I had, you know, me and my dad had. I think at one point we had 5 bars on Teesside. We had a restaurant, Michelin accredited restaurant on Teesside. You know, the only Michelin Bib Gourmand accredited restaurant on Teesside, and I, you know, again pretty quickly had to learn about that operation. You know, the first weekend I genuinely spent washing pots in the kitchen after having the games on the Saturday, just to understand what the kitchen looked like, to understand what a high performing environment outside of my own industry looked like, with chefs and front of house and things like that. So I think that definitely helps me understand what another high performing environment looked like, and being able to use that skill set really in football.
Yeah. So just going back to for those that are listening, when I say MCO, I mean multi-club ownership and that kind of operation you've alluded to, Paul. So do you have anything to do with the other? So like Dundee, for example, you mentioned one of the players has gone out on loan there. I think maybe another one as well. And it seems it's a good like kind of pathway which clubs are using. So do you have much to do with Dundee at all? Are you conversing with them?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, from prior to us really acknowledging in the relationship and the partnership up there, I went up to meet the guys up there and did a football feasibility study really, and did a presentation on what the football side of things looked like at Dundee, and how it could benefit both parties having this relationship. So the first part of that was sending Owen Dodgson, Darragh Costello and Michael Mellon up probably a year ago now, last January. And we give them, you know, the 3 players went on loan, and they were getting their SPL experience, first team experience up there with Tony Docherty, the manager, and the staff. And, you know, what I would say is that the club at the time, Burnley, were Category 2 in the academy system. And, you know, I think that the Category 2 games programme wasn't as challenging. We've all acknowledged that it wasn't as challenging as what the Category 1 games programme is. And so we felt as though we needed to do something different. And that little bit of different thing was having a partner club where we could put our players that could be stress test more than what Category 2 games programme was giving, certainly the under-21s. Yeah. So, it's this season we sent Julian Vetro, and who we got from Bordeaux, and obviously Sion Adewumi, who we bought from Austria. And, Sion's been, he's had a really, really terrific time up there. He's scored goals. He's playing a lot of games, which is exactly what we want as a football club. Part of my role, on top of many other things, is the player development and making sure that all our players out on loan are enjoying the experience and basically hitting the KPIs that we would like. So whether they're an under-18 going on non-league, or whether they're under-21s trying to forge a way in league football, or whether it's our first team players, out on loan at Benfica with Zeki, or Bafemi at Plymouth, or there's just Delquaz at Swansea. It's just making sure that loan programme is also being successful as well for our football club. Whether again, I go back to it, players maximising their potential, or they're maximising their value.
Yeah, perfect. So for the listeners, in terms of kind of paint the picture of that role of the academy manager. I know you went in as the interim. You've obviously hired your replacement as well, Paul. But just how that looks and how that person. So why that role is important, firstly, but then also the other roles that are associated with that. So like the head of coaching and how they manage all the other coaches from the different age groups, and then also how are you continually ensuring that your coaches are getting developed and you are kind of improving as academy over the time as well.
I think what first thing I would say was that the academy manager is there to make sure that the strategy from the club philosophy is being delivered. So the academy will have their KPIs to make sure that we're getting out of the success of the academy what we want. So it's making sure then that as an academy manager that each department are fulfilling their part of the bargain, so to speak, and ensuring that it's a successfully run operation. People forget the academy is probably the biggest department in any football club. Yeah. I remember a CEO of a well-known motor company coming into our academy, and I explained to him there was 36 full-time staff and 185 players, and he looked absolutely gobsmacked, and an academy manager is, that you were heading up that organisation. That's like I say, is probably the biggest organisation in a football club, and it's a crucial role. And so it's ensuring that we have the outcomes and the processes. And unless your processes are right, you're not going to get the outcomes. So it's ensuring that the processes internally, player development is at the forefront of it, and staff development is at the forefront of it. So, to your point about the head of coaching, how head of coach development is crucial, because your head of coach development, that person's there to ensure that the coach is again delivering the coaching philosophy, delivering the playing philosophy in our game model to get the best out of our players, that we can get more players into the first team. So those two roles in itself are extremely crucial to the success of any academy.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. So let's go to more on your specific role now then, in terms of what you're doing day to day, Paul. So one thing I wanted to ask, so at different clubs you have different titles in terms of director of football, technical director and all that sort of stuff. I wanted to ask, I think your history in terms of your previous roles maybe allude to this, but in terms of, is there any significance in the word development at the end of your job title, in terms of director of football development being different to any other clubs at all, or is that just your kind of?
I think it's about from what each club. I think each club and each organisation and each chairman will all have their own idea of what that title looks like, and it's more about, I think, the job description and what clarity is there between you and the chairman and the owner, so that a job title can be, like you say, it could be a sporting director, it could be a technical director, it could be director of football, but essentially it's that agreed job description which is the most important thing. And it's a broad spectrum for me. I have probably a wider scope in terms of our ensuring the football strategy from the technical side of it is its peak performance, really. And I think that's, for me, the most important thing is players, the player pathway. When I talk about pathway, that doesn't mean that we're dealing with a 17-year-old. It could be that I'm dealing with a 26-year-old that, you know, is not in our first team yet has got some value. How do we navigate our way around ensuring that his value is not dropping and maximising his value and potential that way? The multi-clubs are obviously an important part of that, because it all supports the squad development plan that either we have here or with another club that is part of our organisation. So when we, you know, if you have 1 club, 2 clubs, 3 clubs, it may be that you're looking at recruiting a player. Does he fit with your club? Does he fit with club X? Does he fit with club Y? And so, you know, that's, you know, pretty important in terms of how you're going to succeed as an organisation, as a multi-club organisation. So, you know, for me, I work closely with the coaching department and the performance department, and certainly the manager on a daily basis, and working closely with the owner on, you know, just speaking regularly around what our strategy is looking like and where we can improve and what we can do. And I see that conduit between Scott and the owner and the board is important as well. It's important to be visual around the players and agents and things like that. And one of the most important jobs we had to do was 10 months ago. We had to get a new coach. So, you know, having a technical committee that we have here at Burnley is crucial. We don't have a single, I'm going to say, a dictator who runs the whole show. You know, we have a group of a technical committee that with a strong skill set that come together when we need to make them important decisions. And 10 months ago, there was an important decision needed to be made. You know, Vince wanted to speak to Bayern Munich, and as we all know, the rest is history.
Yeah. So you lead me on nicely, because I was going to ask you kind of the different people that you work with within the club then, Paul, and who would you say is who's the person that you speak to most on a day-to-day basis to do your job? Is it the chairman?
My wife. Yeah. Look, I speak to Scott every day. I speak to Matt Williams, our chief operations officer, most days. We have a chief of staff, Sean By. So primarily, the first team staff are the people that genuinely you'll have that relatable conversation with. You know, every morning we have our first team performance coaching staff meeting, so that we all are aware of players and what's happening, what the day looks like. Every morning we have that. So but I think, you know, people, as I said, I speak to Alan, the owner, regularly. Regular conversations with him, but it also entails speaking with board members and investors. You know, every day can look very, very different. Tuesday, my day started at 5:30 on the road, travelling down to Northampton to go and see Dara Costello, who's on loan at Northampton, and then, you know, spend the day watching Dara training and meeting the staff at Northampton to get an update on how Dara's doing. And then travel up to Derby to watch our first team and get home at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it starts at 5:30, I get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm back up again at 6 o'clock. Yesterday, 4 hours sleep, and, you know, you go again, and that's just the nature of our world. You know, Sunday, we have a game tomorrow, we play Norwich City tomorrow night, and then Sunday I fly out to Portugal to meet the Benfica sporting director, to catch up with Zeki Amdouni, who's on loan at Benfica. And, you know, so while you're there, you're maximising the journey and the trip there, not only just to see Zeki and make sure that he's okay, but to build the relationships with Benfica. And while I'm in Lisbon, I'm like, well, I'm at Benfica, you can't waste any time, you need to speak to Sporting Lisbon. So, you know, you set a meeting up with Sporting Lisbon. And you're building up that network of connections with them around player availability and what they might be looking to do in trading, and come back with some relevant information to our recruitment department and to our owner, just to try and get ahead of the game, really.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's and Lisbon's great. I do like Lisbon, actually. So yeah, have you been before, I presume? Or?
No, this is my first trip out. Well, I was in Portugal 3 weeks ago for when the Euros were out there, and Scott Parker, Scotty was saying to me, "Jenks, you got to get out. You're brilliant. You love Portugal. Blah blah blah." I got there. It was absolutely tanking down. It was a monsoon all day. Never stopped raining. Got on a flight to Marbella, to the Marbella Football Centre, to watch some under-21 international football, where it also tanked down all day. So for 2 days, the weather was absolutely disastrous. And just looked on the weather again for Sunday, and you know what? It's raining again.
It's a very nice city, though. I'm sure if you get a bit of sun, you'll enjoy it. So I wanted to ask you, Paul, as well about data. So obviously, my background is in analysis. Kind of lots of analysts watch this channel, and in terms of like the makeup of different technical directors or sporting directors at different clubs, some of them come from a coaching background like yourself, some of them come from analyst backgrounds and different things. So how do you think about data being, again, before I wrote this question, I didn't know about your business background and stuff like that, but being someone that maybe data doesn't come naturally, maybe, or maybe it does, I don't know. How do you kind of think about it and integrate it into your workflows?
Yeah, I think anybody who doesn't use data and anybody who doesn't embrace data are probably going to get left behind. I think the most important thing is how you interpret the data that's presented. So we use data right across the board, both on the field and off the field. Yes, in terms of our performance, in our playing performance, we use data in terms of our recruitment department and how we profile and analyse players. It's a crucial part of any organisation, and if we probably strip that back to what it looks like in a football environment, it's there as a support mechanism, and it's part of the ingredient that helps you form your decisions when you come to signing players, when you come to tactical decisions on the pitch with game modelling and things like that. It's crucial, and if you don't use it and you just want to use any subjective information, I think you're probably going to get left behind. It's important that you have objective information, you have objective data, but it's also making sure that data is contextualized and you understand what the data is telling you, first of all, so that you can interpret it in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the club will have its own data guys, but I'm sure the ALK have got their own analytics people and stuff like that. And like you say, it's the team's performance, recruitment, but then also then acquiring other clubs for the MCO model. That all comes down to kind of data and data analysis and stuff like that. So again, really interesting. Another aspect which data is used more and more so now is kind of head coach recruitment. So I want to touch upon a little bit on that, Paul, if we can. So in terms of, gone are the days when a team needs a new manager, the new manager comes in and everything's just changed, or, you want to bring someone in that fits into the philosophy that you've hopefully spent a lot of time building. So how do you think about kind of, well, you've had to do it in terms of bringing new managers. So how do you think about that? And if you can talk around that a little bit.
Okay. So again, data is a heavily used tool in terms of head coach searches now. I would think. One thing that always used to frustrate me, was when a manager left his position and the club would announce that they would begin their search for a new manager, and I used to just shake my head and scratch my head and think, how can you? And I did a podcast recently around head coach search, and the head coach is probably the most important appointment that you're going to make during your time at your football club. Clubs were spending, I believe, and investing a lot of money in their recruitment departments for players, yet completely ignoring, to an extent, what coaches are doing out there. And so that's where, for me, I began to work just in terms of how you can profile head coaches, and it's important that when you do go to market, when you have to go to market, that it's aligned. These people are aligned with your vision and your strategy, and also aligned with your playing squad. You cannot, gone are the days, again, I would expect, unless it's needed and unless it's a necessity, that you go down a completely different route. So you try your best to make sure that it's not too disruptive in terms of the squad, and you're radicalising something completely different and bringing in a head coach who plays completely the different way to what all the hard work that the recruitment department have done in terms of bringing a squad of players together. And you again, unless it's really specific why you're doing what you're doing, it's important that you have not only the right person in terms of their game model and their coaching and playing philosophy, but crucially you have the right person, the right human being in your environment, because you can have all these tools around you, but if that person doesn't fit with the values of the football club, then it's irrelevant of whatever you've done behind the scenes, because you're still going to come unstuck. So using data to help you search for a coach is going to be a crucial point and a crucial ingredient in probably shortlisting, which is, we extensively search hundreds of coaches to a point where you get to a long list, and then you filter that long list into a short list, and then to an even shorter list where you get to interview stage, which is pretty much where we got to last season.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when you mentioned like clubs starting to look for their replacement. It's clubs nowadays are having almost the scouting coaches as they are scouting players, in terms of they're having that watch list, and they're always keeping tabs on who may be available, who what the situation is with up and coming coaches. But how do you kind of balance bringing someone in that fits the setup that you've got, Paul, but then you also, I would presume, you'd want someone with some fresh ideas as well, not just someone that's just going to do the same. So how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, because you may not want a clone of what you've previously had, because if that hasn't been successful, then why would you bring in somebody who's a clone of the previous occupant? And I'm not using Vince and Scott as a reference point there. I'm just saying that could be at any football club. It's important that you probably have a fine balance and a fine blend of some similar principles, but also looking at what might be needed within the group and within the playing style that might need to be tweaked. And again, it could be division specific. What's required in the Championship is very different to what's required in the Premier League, in terms of, certainly a club like us, when we got relegated, we were ball dominant in the Championship, high possession team. You come down from the Premier League to the Championship, more or less you're going to be faced with a low block. And so you're not faced with a low block in the Premier League because you're dealing with animals, complete robots who are just physically dominant and will get after you from day one. And they'll press the life out of you. They'll go man for man. They'll be really high. There will be spaces in behind. So you come to the Championship where clubs are going to be, happy to take a point if they can, and you're going to, which we found, we've been faced with a lot of teams that have played the low block against us. That requires a completely different type of player and a different methodology and game model. So it's important that when you do recruit your head coach, that he fits in with what you need, but also he has the ability to do something different.
Yeah, definitely. So, not too long left. I know we're approaching the hour mark, Paul, so just a couple more if we can. So, I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned both, obviously, the Scott Parker, the current head coach, and Vince before. Like, what's Scott Parker like to work for? What's he like as a coach? Like, obviously, I think he's going for his third promotion, I think, in terms of, so he's obviously a very accomplished coach. So, and you mentioned you're speaking with him day to day. So, what's he like as a coach and as a person?
First of all, as a person, he's a wonderful human being. I mean, he's a private man, but the conversations are really intelligent. He's a really intelligent man. He understands the game. He sees the game. He's very, very clear on his game model, and I enjoy his company as a human being. From the football aspect, as I said, he's extremely hardworking, phenomenally hardworking. And he's relentless in his time. Anytime you walk in his office, there's a game on. He's completely obsessed with watching us and watching the opposition. And I think that's just these guys at the top of the game. That's probably what you're going to be faced with in terms of their levels of intensity. There's a pretty well-known Premier League manager who's been to probably 5 of our games recently. One reason I know why he's coming to 5 of our games. However, he's still at 5 of our games, and on these night matches when his own team's not playing. That's the level of intensity that these guys work at. And Scott has 2 promotions under his belt out of this division. He's worked with top players. He's worked with Premier League players. He's played in the Premier League. This guy knows exactly what it looks like at the top level. And I just sensed when we interviewed Scott, there was a real desire and a real hunger to want to put some wrongs right. And he learned from Fulham. He learned from Bournemouth. And I think really he learned a lot in Bruges in such a short space of time as well. And so, the desire and the hunger for him to want to succeed is pretty clear to me,
Yeah, well, just I'm not sure exactly when this will go out, but we're recording this with about five or six games left, and you're in the top 2. I think you've only conceded about 2 goals all season, Paul. So you're doing all right. So let's see kind of how it ends. So good luck anyway for that. One thing I do like to ask, Paul, is someone actually submitted this, is there anyone that you've that's influenced you in your career, maybe to get to the position you're in now, or just maybe from your coaching days? It's something that you maybe look up to, or you've learned a lot from in your kind of previous roles?
Yeah, I think I've had many people that I've had the pleasure of being around throughout my time in the game, where you will see a lot of qualities. As a coach, I don't think there was many better than Steve Agnew, who, a fellow Baldy. Steve was just a top class coach, and I just loved working with Steve when I was at Middlesbrough. His knowledge of developing players and how we played a game was fantastic. I just loved my time working with Steve Agnew as a coach. He was excellent for me and developing me. And off the field, I'm fortunate that I have a fantastic family. I have a fantastic extended family. Some of them are highly successful people in their own right in business that have also influenced me. And likewise, very easy. I looked to my dad, and my dad was an entrepreneur who still is, who just had this work ethic, constantly looking at what we can do to get a return on investment, whatever we did within the business side of it. And in terms of mentors, you need to look at your own family first. And off the field, like I said, there were really big influences for me in terms of that. And on the field, I definitely look at Steve Agnew as somebody that I thoroughly enjoyed working with throughout my time at Middlesbrough.
Nice. Ex-Sunderland player as well, so very, very nice.
Yeah, and he's Steve Bruce hasn't gone far wrong with him. He's followed Steve around wherever he's been as well. So he's much respect to Steve, because he sees Agaz's qualities as a coach.
Yeah, definitely. So for those watching then, just finally then, Paul, any advice for people that maybe want to go towards a career as a technical director, a sporting director, maybe they're coming from a coaching background or similar? Anything that you can kind of give us parting words of wisdom?
I'd probably take back to what I said, at the very start of this interview. Really, is that you be the best at what you're currently doing, and if you can be the best at that, then recognition will come. If you only approach things in a half-hearted manner and you're not prepared to put the hours in, and you're not prepared to but you want success from it, it ain't coming. You have to be prepared to really go into the detail, to really educate yourself. I take French lessons now. I'm not doing any football courses, but I've done the pro license, I've done my technical director's license, but I know that I need a second language that can be fluent in. So I'm always pushing myself that way as well. And I would just say to people, please just be the best best person you can be at what you're currently doing, and that, you know, that recognition will come. If you approach it in a half-hearted way and expect it to come, it ain't coming.
Can you give us any French, Paul? How far into your French lessons are you?
Comment allez-vous aujourd'hui?
That's fantastic. That's brilliant. That's perfect.
Oh, you got the accent as well.
Perfect. Well, Paul, really appreciate your time. Thanks very much for...
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, merci beaucoup. Yeah, very much so. So enjoy your trip to Portugal. Good luck for the rest of the season. Hopefully we can have a little playoff success and join you in the Premier League afterwards. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, Paul, and yeah, have a good day.
Thanks, Chris. All the best.